Apple a Day with Dr. Amanda. I'm so glad that you're here. Bring up a chair, make sure you sit down and get yourself a little tea or coffee or whatever you like as we dive into our next episode. And remember that this all is about people speaking their stories, sharing their voice, and also helping us all become a better version of ourselves. So again, like, share, subscribe, and tell a friend since you're on YouTube. So without further ado, I'm so excited to talk about our weekly theme this week, which is family and really navigating pregnancy. And I'm so delighted I have Courtney Fenner here. And Courtney is a mother and a wife, and she is also one of my colleagues who works as an education consultant. So Courtney, thanks for being here and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Absolutely. So I'm so excited to hear, your voice on something that I feel like for a lot of, families or even people or maybe people who aren't pregnant are curious about, and that is navigating pregnancy. And so, Courtney, in terms of your experiences as a mom, I know you have 2 children, what were some unexpected parts of your pregnancy journey?
Sure. So to start, I'll introduce who my kids are too. So I have Emmeline, and I'll probably end up calling her Emmy as I refer to her. And Emmy just turned 3 this July. And then Jonah, who was born March of this year. So he is 5 months. Of course, if you're listening in current times in 2020, in the middle of COVID, everything happening. So he was born in the middle of the state shutting down around us, literally. So that was very different. So a 3-year-old and 5-month-old. So what was unexpected for me was I've been with my husband since high school. And at this point, we've now been married for 7 years. So we ended up getting pregnant a little bit later on. We chose to not try and get pregnant right away in our marriage. And then when it was time, we struggled to get pregnant. And so I knew that not everyone gets pregnant the second that they dream it, wish it, hope it. But I didn't actually think it would take me that long. I've always been healthy. I had no reason to believe it wouldn't take me, or that it would take me so long. But it actually took over a year trying to conceive for Emmy. So that was unexpected. I wasn't anticipating it. And at times I'll talk about it again later as we go throughout, but some of the nerves and the thought process that went with that, trying to be optimistic. But there were a lot of people around me who had struggled in their own pregnancies, trying to conceive. So certainly that was unexpected to begin with. And then both my kids gave me hiccups along the way. Overall healthy pregnancies. But as I got closer to the 3rd trimester with Emmy, we found out that she was turned, that she was breech. So anyone who knows anything about pregnancy is if you want to have not a natural, but a vaginal birth, then having a baby who is breech is not optimistic. So kind of went through that. I was told, it's still early. She might turn. It's okay. And she was not. She was not moving at all. So I was able to successfully have a procedure called an ECP done. So at the hospital, the doctor was actually able to manually, they turn her while she's in my belly, hands on the belly, and rotate. And it went pretty quickly for me. So I was fortunate with that. After having some failed attempts, if anyone's experienced it, spinning babies, trying like inversion, laying with my legs in the air, hoping that the kid's going to turn on their own, frozen peas at the top of the belly to get her to move, and flashlights, crazy stuff. Even after all that, Emmy ended up not wanting to come out on her own. So she was finally born 12 days late. She was due June 24th, born July 6th. And I ended up having to have a C-section. I wasn't anticipating that. I had already gone through having to get her turned. Now I needed to be induced. Like things just weren't happening the way I desired them to. And so she was born. We were both okay, healthy. Her heart rate started dipping during contractions. So all was well, but there was focusing on pregnancy, but postpartum wise, just something to be aware of for women and families who are going through it. There was some grieving of what birth ended up looking like for us. Even though everyone was fine, it was just very different than what I was hoping for with my first pregnancy. Then with Jonah, probably weren't expecting so much, Amanda, asking what are the unexpected. Or maybe so, because it alongside me during both pregnancies with work.
Yeah.
So Jonah was another, it took me a little bit of time. I had hoped to get pregnant earlier. I was fortunate I didn't have any miscarriages in that way. However, it just took longer, and some of that was due to my decision to do extended breastfeeding with Emmy. So for my body, while breastfeeding, I was not able to get pregnant. So it took him a little bit longer to come to us, but he did come. Again, the third trimester rolls around, everything had been looking good, and throughout pregnancy, people were telling me how small I was, which can feel like a compliment when you're pregnant. But then when the doctor confirms you're growing a little bit small, I want to get you checked out, it starts to feel overwhelming and negative when people keep telling you like, oh, you're so small. And it was confirmed that he was growing a little bit smaller. Just his stomach, really. But again, there's all the what ifs. What does this mean? Is he not developing okay? And it meant many, many additional doctor's appointments in a season where you're already having bi-weekly, weekly appointments in the third trimester. So things again ended up being okay with him. He was just a little bit smaller. He was born a little bit smaller too. But there were just added hiccups in both pregnancies when it got to that third trimester.
Well, thank you, Courtney, again, for sharing about the two different births, for Emmy and then Jonah. And again, for Emmy, there was a lot, I'm sure, of different things you didn't expect. And I know you mentioned some of the feelings of grief, like of what does this look like, not knowing, and then having that experience. And then, even with Jonah, where he was growing smaller and probably even anticipating what's going to look like for the labor. And I'm just curious, was the labor different for Jonah, like in terms of what you expected and then what happened?
Yeah, so I did forget to talk about that. Thank you. I really, really wanted to try what's called like a VBAC, so vaginal birth after cesarean or C-section. And the doctors told me, you're a good candidate for that. And thankfully, I was able to have a VBAC. Nothing wrong if I needed a second C-section, but I really wanted to have that experience with him. He was not as late. He was only 2 days late, which was also exciting for me after waiting with Emmy. I was okay with Emmy being late, and then I was like, come on, girl, let's go here. So he was born 2 days after his due date, and it really progressed rather quickly. He was born on a Thursday. That Sunday, I had some contractions, and then it kind of went away. And then that Thursday morning, I woke up, I was having contractions, but it was slow. And then finally, after 7 hours, I called the doctor and I said, I'm having contractions. Should I come in? Not sure what to do. And they said, yeah, why don't you go ahead to the hospital? And they checked me out, said, you're only 2 centimeters along. Hang out for another hour. We're going to keep monitoring you because I was already being monitored additionally with his growth scans. And then 1 hour later, they checked me again. Contractions were intensifying. They said, okay, you're 3 centimeters. You can stay. Meanwhile, COVID had already started. So once my husband is in, that's it. We can't leave at that point. And I had also hoped to have my mother and my sister with me in labor, and they were there for me with Emmy. Of course, they didn't end up in the OR. But they were with me during my laboring process with my daughter. And I had really wanted that again with Jonah. And that was no longer permitted. So I was fortunate in some ways. It was the early time of COVID. So at that point, I could still have a visitor. There are many women across the country who ended up going through labor without a single support person. I was not one of them. I did not have to wear a mask. At that point, we didn't know about masks.
Yeah.
So shoot, remind me where I'm going with this. Yes. So then they checked me out, and before I finally got back to the labor and delivery room, within an hour or less of saying, yeah, you're 3 centimeters, to getting me back, as they were wheeling me back, I was intensifying in contractions. Got to the room and they said, you're 10 centimeters, we're having a baby now. So it all went very quickly, and I had confided in Amanda how I was nervous about the support system. And so that was actually something that Amanda and I had talked about and had prayed about, is like that I will be equipped, that my husband JJ will be equipped. And I just think the timing went beautifully the way that it needed to in our relationship. So Jonah ended up coming fairly quickly after finally. I wasn't admitted to the hospital until hours after he was born. So that was a little interesting.
Well, that's like really interesting, and again, those two different experiences are probably different, right? Because that first, experience and having this other one that was more smooth. Now there was still stuff, but by the end of it, like you said, when you were having those different emotions, and also, working through that. And again, I know you talked to the audience that some people, you didn't have to experience a mask, you were able to have a little bit more support than other people are able to do. I know now there's some differences where you can have a support person in the room. My friend just her sister had a baby and she was there as so she's like the dad, but she's the sister dad. But
Yeah.
again, being able to have that and the mask. So thank you for sharing that. I know you did, Courtney, talk about the grieving, but what other feelings did you have? And perhaps it's from both pregnancies, or maybe perhaps after having Emmy and then going into Jonah, or even the stuff with Jonah. Like, what were the biggest feelings that you had during those experiences?
So if I start with the beginning of pregnancy, I really wanted to be pregnant. I've always wanted to be a mom. And so leading up to finally getting pregnant, it was always kind of a roller coaster of, I'm going to be positive. I know stress isn't good for the body. And then like, oh, it's another month and I'm not pregnant yet. So that actually carried in a bit into, not a bit, it carried into my pregnancies for both of them, because I had already shared that while I didn't have significant medical concerns, I have a number of people around me who have had miscarriages, who have had to go pretty far in the process that they miscarried later, and actually even having to birth their child that they knew that they weren't going to be able to really see, hold, and have their babies with them. So I was often anxious, just kind of waiting for that to drop on me. Like, well, it's happening to everyone around me. Why would I be the one who is spared? Sorry if I cry. And it didn't, and thank God for that. But I had so much anxiety around that, that as excited as I was to be pregnant, I actually wasn't telling anyone. And it wasn't just because of like, you want to wait until it's safe. I was not telling people because I was so sure that it wasn't going to happen for me. I wasn't telling people because so many around me had experienced losses and I felt like it wasn't fair. But at the same time, I loved knowing that I was pregnant. It just feels like this intimate secret, having a little one growing in you, or the few people that maybe you do confide in. So it was kind of bittersweet. Definitely in my second pregnancy with Jonah, anxiety was worse because within the 1 to 2 months that I did get pregnant with him, I had 2 friends lose babies. So it was very fresh with them, whereas with my first pregnancy, it wasn't quite as fresh, some of the losses around me. Unfortunately, anxiety really impacted my emotions with Jonah more so. With Emmy, I was anxious, but I was doing better with her. I got really sick with Emmy and a bit with Jonah. So my husband really did a lot with Emmy because at that point she had just turned 2 when I found out I was pregnant with Jonah. So I had to really lean on him. I know that kind of goes into the question about support systems. I mean, I always lean on him anyway, but like he really became primary caregiver with Emmy, which was great. And I was so fortunate for that. There was almost a grieving there too, because it shifted my relationship with Emmy. So in a good way, it was just kind of hard processing everything at once.
Well, thank you for sharing your vulnerability. And, that can be scary, just talking about, the anxiety, again, with Emmy and everything was okay. And with Jonah, but also, again, your experiences with friends around you, and seeing all these things would be a natural, way to be maybe anxious or fearful and saying, oh my gosh, like, is this going to happen to me? You or some of you in the audience are nervous or pregnant. And again, some of these natural feelings, because I feel like, pregnancy is such a happy time, but yet people don't always talk about you know, the things of, yes, when you're pregnant, or like how you might feel, and like really keeping that hope, or, you know, like seeing things around you, you know, or people losing babies at, you know, the very end of the pregnancy, very hard things that happen. So Courtney, you know, I appreciate you sharing that. And also like talking about how, and I know you'll talk about support, but then how, like, you know, your husband JJ, like how he was able to step up, but that also was a shift because now you're carrying another baby and there's going to be another dynamic change, yet you're still going to be family, but navigating that. And so really, you know, talking about support, and I know you talked about it, but did you have a lot of support during your pregnancy? And I know you said your husband, but were there other people that supported you in the process?
Right. So definitely JJ was a big piece of the puzzle in both pregnancies for sure. And then even, I would say even more so with Jonah, because life had just shifted for us. There were job changes for him and then responsibilities for me at work. My schedule looked very different this past year while I was pregnant with Jonah. So there was a lot of changes in that way. Both JJ and I, we live where we grew up, so our parents are still close to us physically as well as emotionally. I definitely leaned on them, and my sister is always the biggest support person. She's not far from me physically, too far, but not that far, like an hour and a half. They were the ones I leaned on the most. And then since I had shared about some of how I held back sharing my pregnancies, my coworkers, I would actually put before some of my friends because I wasn't telling my friends. Mm-hmm. And even with many of my coworkers, I waited quite some time. Amanda knows we have fabulous department support system. And truly, I'm not just saying this, Amanda is a huge support and confidant. They were really the ones around me that I was talking to the most, or could kind of share like, oh, I'm having a tough day, or I'm not feeling great. This is what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's great that you know, Courtney, were able to have, you know, like you said, JJ, you know, and your families, and, you know, again, us as coworkers, and again, you're also an amazing coworker, you know, and I feel like we just have, you know, we're supportive, and I'm glad that you had support. And even, you know, when there were times where I know you were anxious, like we were able to talk or go in my little prayer corner.
Yes.
But, you know, especially during this, because there are different emotions. So I'm glad that you had support, and hopefully in the audience, you know, some of you do have support, you know, I'm hoping you do, or somebody, even if it's coworkers, maybe it's not family, right? Sometimes that can be difficult. And I don't know, Courtney, like, you know, if you have any suggestions, some of the people out there may be going through pregnancy without, you know, a husband. They might be single moms. They may be going through transitions, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that happens, or perhaps they don't have family. Like, do you have any suggestions for them in terms of support?
I mean, I think what's most important is having one person, at least, who is one person that you can turn to both with happy news or for positive things, but then they're also going to be your foundation, someone to kind of lean on when things aren't going as well. And it's helpful, not mandatory, but helpful if that other person has kind of walked that path before or has some experience. Because when I'm talking about a baby being breech and, you know, I really want a VBAC and I'm worried, and what I'm hearing from people who haven't gone through that is like, well, it's fine. As long as the baby's happy, it's fine. And what you don't realize sometimes is we think we're being supportive, but you actually end up dismissing how someone is feeling. So being aware of who is that one person I can go to who always builds me up, and even if they kind of have to talk maybe logic or reason to me, like I can trust them, and it's that trusted place. You know, social media is a black hole.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of people on Instagram, Facebook groups that I joined as well that I was getting information from, especially in trying to learn more about ways to hopefully have that VBAC that I wanted, but also just a way to learn more. There's so much to learn in pregnancy. To kind of interact, even if it's with strangers, you're still getting that validation and that soundboard. So don't dismiss if you don't have someone right there. There's a lot available. You know, having a person that you know, I think is probably optimal, but there's other ways to get that support too. And of course, medical professionals for women who might want to have a support person, such as a doula to help them through pregnancy. Those are great support systems as well. My sister used a doula in her first pregnancy, had a very positive experience. I didn't use one myself though.
No, and those are really good suggestions. Again, one person or, again, the medical field or somebody that you can, is a confidant, and or even the Facebook or online different support groups, or even like face-to-face, depending, on preferences or, whatever that is. There's different things. So just maybe reaching out and seeing like different groups that might be suitable for you on Instagram or the media, or finding a safe place for you personally. That's good. Thank you.
Right.
Talked about some of your feelings already, and it seemed like it changed depending on each pregnancy. Like I was just going to ask about the timing, but I guess, and you did talk a little bit about this, but how you process your feelings during pregnancy. Were there other ways that you process your feelings during pregnancy that you didn't mention?
Mm-hmm. A lot of it was talking it out when I felt like I could. I'm not gonna lie. So I have a tendency to like push it down as fine and try and, I'm an internal processor, and sometimes I do a little bit too much internally and not sharing. And that goes with not always sharing with people. And then also like in my prayer life, certainly prayer was a big one, trying to turn more there and just trusting that everything would be okay and trusting the process, what was happening, my feelings, but definitely talking it out when I had the opportunity. And sometimes I needed people to point blank ask me. I'm not always one to start talking when I'm going through something. Sometimes I need someone else to be the one who initiates, again, because I'm more someone who can keep things to myself sometimes. Unless it's like really boiling over, then, pot explodes.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for that. Again, like talking, because different people do, navigate and process it differently. But again, like you were saying, like it does help to be able to share it, and sometimes we don't know how to begin that conversation, or, again, some people may ask, how are you doing? And people may or may not answer, right? Depending on how ready you are. But I think that is important, and even, being able to express that. So, again, thanks, Courtney, for sharing about your own process, because again, it looks different for every person. But it is important to process, whether you write or you journal or you talk to somebody or you talk out loud or whatever you got to do. It's really hard sometimes, in a society we live in that, I don't know, I personally think that, we always say, well, you're stronger if you don't cry. And my whole persona, I don't know about you, Courtney, my persona has changed on that. I think the stronger you are, the more you cry and you're able to express yourself, because, that is how you can actually get healthier, not stuff it down, but it's almost like a shift of mindset. Because, we lived in a place where it's like, we'll be strong, but strong is okay to cry. It's okay for us to cry. And I think that's been a shift that people are still having a hard time with. So, yeah. All right. And then looking at, Courtney, and I know you've talked about this, but what other books or resources, like I know you mentioned some online things, but do you have any books or resources that you would recommend for mothers maybe in pregnancy or people going through this, or any of those things besides the online media groups or anything like that?
Well, I was also listening to podcasts, which kind of coincides, at least one of them, evidence-based birth, and it gives you all of the research and evidence-based information on a number of things related to pregnancy and the actual birthing process. And so I was trying to hone in more on VBACs for that and understanding labor as well, because as much as I read with my first pregnancy with Emmy, I know that I still had a lot I could have learned, and maybe things that I would have done differently, felt empowered to say or do if I had had that knowledge. So evidence-based birth, I use them. They do have, social media as well as podcasts. Just for like fun things, Baby Center I used as an app. So as you're learning when you get pregnant, it's one of those apps that will also tell you like comparing your baby to the size of a fruit, or like your baby is the size of a coconut this week, and your baby's, their hair is growing and they can hear you. And these are ways that you can start bonding already, even when they're still in your womb, or that your partner can bond if you have a partner at the time, a supportive person in pregnancy. So actually learning about the physical changes for yourself and the baby, and then just like the little fun things that go along with that pregnancy. So those were some resources. There's a slew more. I want to specifically say I did not use it because of the timing of my last pregnancy, but I think I'm trying to roll for the answer. Okay, so on social media, this is how I found them. Probably a podcast that got me to social media. And Amanda, I don't know if you ever like write out in your notes or there's a spot to put, okay.
Yeah,
so,
you have to put like I'll put like any of the resources you suggest, I'll put into the description on the YouTube and then the podcast.
Awesome. So there's a team of an OBGYN and a therapist actually who came together. So it's Dr. Sterling is the OBGYN and then Dr. Cassidy, who is the therapist. And it's a female team, and they both actually just had babies within this last year too. And they came together and created a pregnancy guide as well as a postpartum guide, is what a lot of people aren't aware of. And certainly it was navigating it during the time of that afterbirth, which is called the postpartum period or the 4th trimester. This kind of that time, like the baby's not really ready to be out and your body is going through so many changes. The hormones don't stop once baby is born. There's a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of shifts in your relationships. So they came together and created a guide for pregnancy as well as a guide for postpartum. And just with the content I have received from them or consumed and listening to them on different podcasts, I really think it would be a valuable resource, especially for first-time mothers, but not only for first-time mothers. So I'd say those are two that definitely I would check out, and then that evidence-based birth.
Great, thank you. And again, for audience, if you're looking for resources, I know Courtney mentioned, 3 or so different resources, so that will be listed so that you can go there. Courtney, if you're okay with it, I might see if I can have your email, or if anybody had questions.
Sure.
Is that okay? So we'll put that as well in the description. So if they had questions,
Right.
they can email you. And so, Courtney, I really appreciate all of the different information you talked about during pregnancy, the emotions, how your own story, and it's really important. And I wanted to really have us finalize this talk with what is one, I usually say takeaway, but really what's one wisdom tip or one more thing that you would share with the audience, perhaps of mothers that are in the, going through pregnancy, they're about on the verge of it, or they're going through that whole process and, or, maybe nervous. Like, what is one more thing you'd like to share with them?
I think the biggest thing is to sit with your feelings and be okay with the way you're feeling. Feel validated in your feelings. Even if others around you might have a different voice, maybe they haven't experienced it, maybe they've experienced pregnancy differently, they might not understand what you're walking through or the emotions that you're having. It is absolutely okay to feel how you feel, and don't let others dismiss you, whether you are nonstop filled with joy or if you are sick, if you are nervous, anxious, overwhelmed. It's okay to feel that way. And I think we really have to feel comfortable with that, with being uncomfortable and being sharing with others too, because it is a really big change for you. And it's a really big change for those in your life around you. It's going to cause shifts in relationships and your just day-to-day, what is happening both during pregnancy and certainly after birth. It's a beautiful miracle, birth and having children, but there's also a process in how you change as a woman and how maybe you change as a partner when you do have a baby. So definitely sit with your feelings, confide in others. Before, Amanda, you were talking about like ways, outlets that you have, whether it's talking out loud, journaling, etc. And definitely for myself being internal, like I'm thinking, or a lot of time driving with work, it would be like that process in the car, thinking through things. But definitely whatever you're feeling, it's okay to feel that way.
Thank you, Courtney. And that's, I know you've shared a lot of wisdom today, but really, I think that's a really great ending of this is for the audience to know it's okay to feel how you feel, you know, allow yourself to find people that affirm you and perhaps they don't understand, and you know, also be aware of that, but also be okay navigating through your feelings, you know, and like Courtney said, some people are more internal, or you know, you know yourself, so you know what you need for that, and also you may know when you're not sharing, you know, again, and where you need that extra support. So again, you know, in the audience, you know, we love you, you know, and we hope that everything goes well, but again, you're going to have those feelings during it, and you know, just knowing the reality of this, but also the hope that there is, you know, even in the hardest circumstances. So again, Courtney, I thank you for your time today. And audience, yeah, and if you like this, share, subscribe, tell a friend. Again, we're on every day, Monday through Friday, with different guests in the week and different things to keep you on your toes. But again, Courtney Fenner, thank you for your time. And
yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And everybody be well. Have a great day and catch you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.